Okay. So good evening, everyone who has joined us well on time. Okay. So today's topic, what we're going to discuss is on pelvic floor from Menarche to Menopause. Okay. So this has been organized by Josh Clinic and the Chronic Pain Support Group for Women, which has been there for the last 3 years, basically to educate and develop awareness regarding women's health and fitness. Okay. So in today's topic, we have two young and dynamic speakers, Rathpriya and Ms. Mubeena Banu, who will be sharing their discussions on pelvic from Menarche to Menopause. So a few reminders before the start of the session. Please keep yourself unmuted unless asked to the speakers. And if you have any questions related to the topic, you can put up in the chat box, which we'll take up at the end of the session. Okay. So hope you all have a great session and meet you at the end of the session. So we'll start up with the speakers. Rathpriya, you can start up the session.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. Starting with a small intro about myself. I'm Rathpriya and I have done my graduation from Dr. MGR Medical University, and I'm also certified in yoga and trained in pelvic floor rehabilitation, and I'm currently working in Josh Physiotherapy Clinic in Bangalore. That's it about me. On behalf of Mother's Day and National Women's Health Week, we have taken up this initiative to start this session to put an end to all those unanswered and unvoiced questions which is running in most of our minds regarding the pelvic floor, and to bring it to light. When most of our musculoskeletal pains and problems are being addressed and opened up, it is still a taboo when it comes to the pelvic floor. So let us put an end to all those things now. We'll be covering the basic level of information regarding the topic we have chosen: pelvic floor, Menarche to Menopause, hormonal integrity and influences. I'll be covering the basics of what is the pelvic floor exactly, and what are the structures and the functions of the pelvic floor, and the basic levels of what is hormones and its influence in the bodily functions. Next to me, my co-speaker, Ms. Mubeena, she'll be covering the pelvic floor dysfunctions and the prevalence ratio and the management part of the pelvic floor dysfunctions. Shall we start?
Yes.
So starting with this, shall we go to the next slide? So in this first session, we'll be starting with the activity. So when most of us are familiar with all the parts of our body, still we are unfamiliar with our external genital organs. Let us start our naming our private parts. So can anyone in the participants name what is this black color coded part? Please post your answers, unmute yourself or post your answers in the chat box. Okay. So the black color coded part, which is your labia majora, which is the outer covering, which is the fleshy muscle layer, which is the outer lip of the pelvic floor muscles or the external genital organs, which is covering your internal genital organs. It is a protective layer. The next goes with the orange color coded part. Can anyone of you name it?
It is labia minora.
So the orange, yes, good, very good. So labia minora, which is the inner lip of your internal genital organs. The third comes your blue color coded part. Do anybody have the answer?
It is hymen.
Great. So it's your hymen, which is allowing the flow of the menstrual cycle through the vagina. The red color coded part is your clitoris, which has its function.
Yeah,
yes.
clitoral hood.
Yes. The clitoris, which has its important function in the sexual response. The gray color coded part.
Urethral opening.
Yes, It is the urethral opening where we pass out the urine. Then comes your yellow color coded part.
Vaginal opening.
Yes, it is your vaginal opening, which is helpful for your childbirth, during the childbirth and also during your menstrual cycle. The green color coded part is your, yes, we have the answer.
Perineal body.
Yes, it is your perineal body. It is the central part of attachment for all your perineal muscles. Then comes the last one, your anal opening, where we pass out our feces. So let's move on to the next slide. Let us start discussing about the structure of the pelvic floor muscles. As the name suggests, pelvic floor is the floor of the pelvis, which is formed by the two hip bones extending from the pubic bone in the front to the tailbone or the coccyx behind. It resembles a hammock or sling-like structure which is holding the pelvic organs. So in the front, next to your pelvic bone, pubic bone, is your bladder. Behind comes your uterus, and then comes your bowel. There are also openings in these pelvic floor muscles. The extension of the bladder comes your urethral opening, where we pass out our urine. Then comes the uterus. We have the vaginal extension of it is the vaginal opening, where the menstrual cycle happens and also which is useful for your childbirth. Next comes your bowel, that is the terminal part of your intestine, where we void the feces. Okay, let us discuss some of. So sorry. Can we go to the next slide, Mubeena? Yes. So as we have discussed, we have three main openings in our pelvic floor muscles. Then comes your musculatures. There are four main layers of your pelvic floor, starting from the deepest, going to the superficial, that is from the innermost to the outer side. So the deepest or the innermost layer is your endopelvic fascia, where there are a lot of ligaments which is holding the structure stable. Let us take an example. When you taut a ball in the two sides with a string, it remains stable and it is having its structural stability and it does not move. The same way, your pelvic organs are taut by the structures called the ligaments, which is holding the structure stable. When these ligaments or any one of the side of your ligaments becomes slack, it automatically weakens your pelvic floor and there is some disturbance in your pelvic floor dysfunctions happens. The second layer of your pelvic floor comes your pelvic. Sorry for the technical issues. So moving on to the second layer of your pelvic floor, which is your pelvic diaphragm, which forms the floor of your pelvic floor muscles, which has the levator ani group of musculatures, namely the pubococcygeus, ischiococcygeus, and iliococcygeus. Each of these musculatures have its specific functions in the pelvic floor. Let us discuss the functions in our next upcoming slides. So then comes your third layer of the pelvic floor, which is the urogenital diaphragm. Then your fourth layer of your pelvic floor is the external genital organs. Yes. So coming to the fourth layer of your pelvic floor is where your external genital muscles are present, which helps in supporting the pelvic floor musculatures. Also has specific functions. Moving on to the next functions of the pelvic floor. We have 5 major functions of the pelvic floor. starting up with your supportive structure. Then comes your stabilization, followed by sphincteric activity, then your sexual activity, then in lymphatics. So starting with the supportive structure, pelvic floor is providing a hammock or sling-like structure where it supports all your pelvic organs. Then coming to the stabilization part, pelvic floor muscle forms the integral part of your core muscles, and thereby it provides the postural stability. We'll be discussing it in detail in our next slide. Then comes your sphincteric activity. The resting tone of the muscles helps to maintain the continence. For example, when we happen to do any activities like coughing, sneezing, or jumping, the internal abdominal pressure tends to get increased. Because of this, coming up to opening of your muscle. Excuse. Starting up with your sphincteric activity. So when we happen to do some activities like jumping, coughing, or sneezing, the internal abdominal pressure automatically gets increased. Because of this, when the pelvic floor tension is not maintained, it happens to go for pelvic floor dysfunctions, or it happens to go for pelvic floor relax, or the contents of the openings is getting disturbed. So it not only controls the leakage, also helps to prevent the closure, also helps in the closure. Next comes your sexual activity. It has starting with your sexual function. There are number of sensory nerve endings in your pelvic floor, which helps in the sexual response. It helps in the erection. It also helps in maintaining the dynamic changes in the vaginal canal as the effect of the sex response to arousal. Next comes your lymphatic function. It creates a pump for the lymphatic drainage along with your diaphragm. So moving on to the next slide. Mubeena, can you move on to the next slide, please? Yes. As we discussed earlier, the pelvic floor muscles forms the base of the group of muscles, which is commonly called the core. When we happen to ask somebody to point out where the core muscles is, we happen to show our abdominal and the back muscles as your core muscles. but it also extends from your diaphragm below to your pelvic floor muscles. These muscles work with the deep abdominal and the back muscles and diaphragm to support the spine and control the pressure inside your abdomen. For example, when you're lifting a weight, internal pressure increases. When we put down the weight, automatically the internal pressure within the abdomen decreases and returns to normal. There is a regulation of pressure within the abdomen happening automatically. When lifting the weight, the muscles of the core work all together. So as I was saying, regulation of pressure within the abdomen happens automatically. When lifting the weight, the muscles of the core work all together. The pelvic floor muscles lifts up, the abdominal and back muscles draw in to support your spine. That's how your breathing is made easy. If any one of these muscles of these core get weakened or damaged, then this coordinated automatic action gets altered. Then there is potential to overload your pelvic floor, causing depression and strain over time, and it results in pelvic floor dysfunctions or some pelvic floor symptoms. Pelvic floor needs to be flexible, that is, it has to be able to lift, relax, and also hold. Can you move to the next slide, Mubeena? So to make it easy, let us consider the pelvic floor muscles or the pelvic floor, comparing it to a suspension bridge. In the suspension bridge analogy, it illustrates how the pelvic floor structures are interdependent on each other. In suspension bridge, strength maintained through tensioning of the suspensory steel wires. Weakening of any one part of the structure may disturb the equilibrium, strength, and function of the whole bridge. So when correlating with the pelvic floor, the vagina, bladder, and bowel are suspended from the bony pelvis by some structures like ligaments and fascia. If your pelvic floor gets damaged, then there is any damage to the structures supporting these pelvic organs. Please move on to the next slide, Mubeena. So before we discuss the major hormones which is essential for reproductive system, let us discuss what these hormones are. Hormones are the chemicals that the endocrine system uses to send the messages to the organs and tissues throughout your body. When these hormones are released into your blood, each hormone has its specific functions. It helps in controlling and regulating the body functions. For example, the sleep-wake cycle, your mood swings, your blood pressure, heart rate, appetite, growth and development, sexual function, and reproduction. Each gland has its own body functions. The screen is not visible, Mubeena.
I think I'm sharing it from my side, Rati. I think maybe because of the internet.
Okay.
You want me to change the slide or?
Yes, in the same slide. So the major group of hormones is responsible. So the previous slide only. Yes. So the major group of hormones which plays an important role in the female reproductive system is your estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Estrogen is produced from your ovaries, which helps in regulating your menstrual cycle. It helps to maintain your pregnancy. It helps in the development of female sex characteristics and also aids in the sperm production. Next comes your progesterone, which helps or prepares the body to prepare for the pregnancy when the egg is fertilized. Next comes your testosterone, which contribute to the sex drive in both the genders and helps to develop the male sex characteristics. All these hormones are present in both the genders in different ratios. Any hormone that is regulating all the above or influenced by all the above has an impact on the pelvic floor. So to the next slide, please. So when there is always an interplay between the hormonal functions, when a person is supposed to go into stress or any mental trauma or sleep, or the sleep disturbed, it activates your hypothalamic pituitary and adrenal axis. Your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is the main physiological system that mediates your body's stress response. So this stimulates the anterior pituitary glands to secrete adrenocorticotropic hormones, which further stimulates or acts on the adrenal cortex to stimulate and produce the cortisol, which is an important stress hormone. Also, it has an impact on the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, which is responsible for your reproductive competence or the maturation of your reproductive organs. The hypothalamus, which produces your gonadotropic releasing hormone, affects the pituitary and stimulates it to produce the luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormones, which has an impact on the ovaries, which produces estrogen and progesterone. When the stress level is, to make it more easy, when the stress level is increased, your adrenaline gets secreted more and your happy hormones like serotonin gets decreased, which is indirectly going to affect your sleep-wake cycle. Also has an interplay with your reproductive cycle. So here we cover the basics of pelvic floor, its structures and the functions of the pelvic floor and the basics of the hormones. So my co-speaker Mubeena, she'll be covering the hormonal influences in each stages of the woman's life.
Thank you, Rati. Thank you for giving a very brief insight on the basics of what we are going to cover for the next half. And a warm good evening to all. First of all, I want to thank Joshua sir for giving me this opportunity so that I could address a group of 30 on a topic that is being very less addressed among general public, even among medical professionals. And I'm so sorry for the bad voice. I have a severe throat infection. And if you aren't clear for anything what I say, or if my voice is not proper, please let me know in the chat box. Rati has given a very brief note on how hormones are going to influence a woman's life. So taking it from there, I'm going to start with, like, she had given anatomy, like how your pelvic floor is, what is the function of pelvic floor, what it does, how important it is. So before I go into what hormones do for pelvic floor, I want to make a very important point to all of you, that like how your heart works for 24/7. Pelvic floor is also another group of muscle that is going to work 24/7 in both a women as well as in a man's life. It's not just pelvic floor is very much important in a woman's life. It is important in all genders, men, women, or even in transgender, trans men, trans women. But the thing is, there are a lot of prevalent studies that is being done that has stated levels of statistics that women suffer from a lot of pelvic floor dysfunction when compared to that of men. And that is why we are going to target this whole concept into completely from a women's point of view. So as you see in the picture, women go through a lot of changes as she ages on, from her childhood till her death. So from when a child is born, they are not like very much influence or excuse me. Joshua sir, I think this meeting is going to end in 10 minutes. Okay.
I think it will extend 1 minute.
Okay, sir, I'll be continuing it. If it stops, shall we share the other meeting ID?
Yeah. Please share it in the chat box, no?
Oh, yes, sir.
I'll also share it to the personal
Yes,
messages. Yeah.
Okay. Can you share in the chat box, sir?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, when a child is born, you would know when we were child, we weren't having a proper bladder control because there was no integration between your neural system, your pathway, as well as the effector organ that is going to be your pelvic floor. So micturition, the way you urinate or defecate is because like that is we are being trained for it. Our muscles, our body, our mind, everything is being trained for it. So that is what your childhood is relating to pelvic floor. So when you're going to a stage of uh, before your teen, from 5 to 10 to 15 years of age, that is before your adolescent, it is like your pelvic floor is not as much as flexible because your hormones that are responsible for the flexibility, that is responsible for making your vagina, to prepare your vagina for your sexual activity, for your reproductive life, is not yet get into a control. So your pelvic floor is designed in such a way that is not much flexible. At that time, it is not even so rigid. So it is between the phase of rigidity and flexibility. So when you move on to your teens, that is where your menarche hits up and your reproductive hormones come into a role. And as Rati said, estrogen that is going to be responsible for your female sexual characters is also going to take the responsibility for making your pelvic floor even more flexible by increasing the collagen content. Like how your skin is now flexible when you have a lot of collagen, your skin is very much flexible. The same way, your vagina as well as your pelvic floor is going to get into a state of more flexibility. So moving, and it is going to prepare the vagina for the sexual life. Okay. So as age progress, adolescence, adult, you go into a regular sexual activity, and thereby it results in pregnancy. So when it comes to pregnancy, again, the hormones are going to give an interplay. When God has designed a woman such way, she is going to bear almost 3 to 4 kgs of baby weight. So for that to be done, your relaxin is going to be the key hormone that is going to regulate, and it is going to give some amount of relaxation to your whole body, from the muscles of your head to that of your toe. Everything is going to get an effect of that relaxin hormone. As the name suggests, it is going to relax, it is going to smoothen out, it is going to make it even more flexible, and it is going to also give up some amount of loosening. Out of all these things, your pelvic floor is going to also get affected. Imagine for a 2 kg baby weight, your pelvis is going to take up the weight. As such, your pelvis is going to take up the weight. The same way, your pelvic floor is also going to take it up. And imagine a 2 kg of weight over your pelvic floor. Your pelvic floor is like a hammock, and you're going to put 2 kg of weight to it. Of course, it will stretch. So there is chances of this, that is pregnancy induced pelvic floor weakness, or a physiological weakness that occurs in your pelvic floor. So after pregnancy, even like see, there are a lot of things like women are complicated. Yes, God has designed women to be very complicated. After pregnancy, your pelvic floor is going to go into two phases. One is going to be a very immediate postnatal phase, and the other is going to be a late postnatal phase, which is like from 1 to 12 weeks of postpartum or delivery. 1 to 12 weeks post delivery is going to be an immediate to a little later postnatal period, and after 12 weeks or till 1 year, it is going to be late postnatal period. So imagine you are going to deliver a 2 kg of weight baby. So either it is going to be an LSCS or a normal vaginal delivery or an assisted vaginal delivery. Your pelvic floor is going to have some impact of it. Yes, it is going to be because of your hormone, because of the baby weight, because of the whole posture that is going to change, or the lifestyle of a woman. Even lifestyle of a woman accounts for a pelvic floor change in pregnancy and postpartum. So imagine if a woman is going for a normal vaginal delivery or a spontaneous vaginal delivery, she will definitely have a perineal cut. In the very first slide, Rati has explained, or she asked you to name a lot of parts, external genital parts. You would see that she showed a part called perineal body, and there is going to be a cut which is going to promote the passage of baby out to an environment. So when that cut is made, that cut is going to be deep enough that some muscles of your pelvic floor are even to be cut. So there is going to be a stitch, there is going to be a healing time. And again, postpartum period, women complain of a lot of pelvic floor muscle weakness symptom. So as age occurs and occurs, there is going to be another pregnancy or even multiple pregnancy. So imagine one pregnancy is going to have this much of effect, weakness of pelvic floor. There is going to be pelvic floor weakness. There is going to be stretchability. There is going to be a cut. There is going to be the effect of baby weight. There is going to be an effect of hormone. Imagine if that is occurring for the second time or even the third time in some women, third time. So there is going to be a change even after her delivery or even after her sterilization. She is going to have that change forever if she is not being properly addressed. If her pelvic floor is not being properly addressed, then that change is going to last even for her lifetime. So after pregnancy, there is going to be another period of a woman's life that is going to take up a major contribution to pelvic floor, that is going to be her menopausal. So when there is going to be a menarche, there is going to be a menopause. And in today's environment, in today's social life, and in today's lifestyle, it is almost like 45 years. Women from 45 years to 50 or 55 take up, like they go into their menopause stage. And that menopause is also being divided into premenopausal, perimenopausal, and postmenopausal. Premenopause is a period where a woman is exactly before the exact period of menopause. Menopause is like her whole reproductive cycle is just going to end. All the hormones that is responsible for her reproduction is going to get a surge down, and the effect is going to be even more severe. So imagine estrogen is being production is being very less, or at an eventual period of time, estrogen production is very liable and it is nearing to a stopping stage. As I told, estrogen is responsible for the collagen in the vaginal tissue as well as in the pelvic floor. So if estrogen is stopped, what will happen? There will be no collagen. Collagen is directly responsible for the extensibility. So what happens? See, imagine the same with your skin. Old age women will have a lot of wrinkles. There will be no flexibility. There will be either looseness. There will be a lot of the subcutaneous fat will go off. The normal contour of the face will differ. Apply it same to the vaginal tissue and to the pelvic floor. Either she can go for atrophy, vaginal dryness, all these things occur, or associated with it, there will be a marked weakness, and that will contribute to prolapse. And that is why women after age of like 45 or 50, they are more prone for prolapse kind of conditions. So this is the thing, from birth to death, all these changes happens in pelvic floor of a woman. And why it is like more concerning to women, because men don't go through these stages of pregnancy induced changes in pelvic floor, or postpartum induced changes, or pre or post menopausal induced changes. Yes, they have pelvic floor dysfunction, but there are a lot of stages, a lot of changes, and lot of problems even associated with it. Now we are just going to go for the prevalence. Yes, as you can see in the slide, there are four highlighted prevalence. One is going to be incontinence. Incontinence is like if I am having an urge to urinate, if I want to pass urine, and if the situation is not that fair,